And we're up. Good evening, everybody. Tuning in on YouTube, our app, or our website, WCNC.com, or various social means across the Southeast. I'm meteorologist Brad Panovich here in Charlotte, North Carolina. A couple other fellow meteorologists up in the Greensboro market. I'll hand it off to them. Grant and Tim up at WFMY. Guys, how you doing tonight?
Doing well, doing well. I mean, so far, so good. We've got, a lot of rain coming across the area, and this rain is really starting to fill in across the triad. We've got the expectation of working with some flooding tonight. We'll talk more about that here, but of course, WFY is ready to go.
We're ready to go. Maybe not a lot of rain yet. We're still expecting some rain to be coming our way. We are not going to see nearly as much of rain as we would have seen just a couple of days ago, the way things were looking with a 1-2 punch from Joaquin. Now that's not happening, and it looks like for folks in Charlotte, down Brad's way, they're going to get more rain than us here in the Triad, but still something to watch.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting because we were talking about that before we went on air here, is the sharp contrast or gradient there's going to be across the Carolinas, and probably the biggest headache for us as forecasters is trying to figure out where does that heavy rain band set up, and kind of where do we get a ton of rain and where do we get a little bit of rain. And looking at the orientation of the radar tonight, it's kind of interesting because when you looked at the guidance, the orientation of this band looked like it was going to be more like northwest southeast, and tonight it's kind of more north-south. So I'm curious what you guys think, if this is a temporary thing or if it's going to start pivoting back towards the southwest maybe.
Well, I mean, I think, really watching it set up is going to be the key at this point. We've, I'm kind of got the radar here on the side. I apologize for everybody watching. If you've got the app, maybe pull up the radar as well. But, we're looking at this thing setting up, and it really looks like it's starting to fill in. And, it's north-south now. Earlier on, it looked like it was kind of starting to tilt. So probably the next 3 hours will really be a good indicator of what we see as we go overnight tonight into tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the key is if it pivots back down and if it starts drifting into the mountains, because I don't know about you guys, I'm concerned about Charlotte, obviously, that we're going to get some really heavy rain in here, but my biggest concern is that we're going to see, this thing kind of all basically tilt back towards the mountains and end up seeing a bunch of heavy rain that floods the mountains and causes flash flooding up there and bridge outages and stuff like that across that area.
Yeah, I'd be concerned in the higher elevations of the mountains, especially down, the western parts of your viewing area, Brad, down by Asheville, and you start to get into the Blue Ridge. The upslope's going to be killer, depending on where that band sets up, especially down where it hangs out for most of the weekend. South Carolina, upstate could be in really big trouble. That rain is just going to just wring itself out wherever that band just totally sets up, which does look to be kind of along the North Carolina-South Carolina border and farther south of that.
Yeah, and the mountains, most of the mountain counties have had so much rain in the last week or so. We had, Blowing Rock at about 10 inches, I think. Over there towards Asheville, how about 8 inches? So most of the creeks and streams, the hillsides up there, are almost completely saturated. So it's going to take very little up there to cause flooding. What do you guys think about duration-wise? I mean, moving in tonight, you get this flood watch for the entire state of North and South Carolina, which is probably the first time I've ever seen that.
Me too.
Do you think it's going to last all the way to Monday? Because when you start looking at some of the guidance now, it kind of looks like this thing could be meandering across the southeast, maybe right into Monday afternoon.
I mean, looking at it, it was really one of those things where, like, all along, well, not all along, I should say, the last 24 hours, because things have changed a lot since earlier this week. But, I mean, you guys down in Charlotte, South Carolina, even, through western North Carolina, this band gets set up there along the North Carolina-South Carolina border, extending south into Columbia and off into the coast of South Carolina, and that sits there maybe through Sunday and Monday. Meanwhile, here in the Triad area, a lot of that rain stays south, so we get our heavy rain tonight into tomorrow morning. That whole band pivots, and we've just got a couple of stray showers, maybe some pockets of heavy rain kind of going through Saturday night into Sunday. And we're working with, not much in the way of excessive rainfall at that point. Meanwhile, you guys unfortunately are still just stuck with it.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how long the band takes to pivot. It looks like it's pivoting kind of quickly. If you look at the water vapor imagery, you can almost imagine the kinks are starting to form where it gets more orientated toward South Carolina and Charlotte. So for us, this might be, you wake up 12 hours from now, Saturday morning, and there is not much left other than some scattered showers, which for us would be good news, of course, because we can't handle much rain. We've had about a foot of rain in our northern counties the last couple of days anyway. So we really don't want to see too much of it. Of course, we thought we were going to see a bunch, and now it's looking like the lower end of the totals, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I pulled up our radar here. This is my GR Earth here, and the band we're talking about for people watching extends up to the Virginia border all the way down off the South Carolina coast. And you start to see, especially just west of Wilmington there, down towards the sandhills of North Carolina, down the low country, you're seeing 2-3 inch rainfall totals and some flooding going on. So that's the only thing that has me kind of concerned tonight is I watch how some of the flooding is occurring. One thing that I think is caught a lot of people off guard, and maybe we didn't do a good job of hitting this home in the last couple of days, was one, how cold it is, and two, how windy it's actually been tonight. This is not a tropical downpour. This is like a raw, windy nor'easter type of feel to this air.
It's almost like the temperatures were an afterthought with all of this. We were sitting there saying, yeah, at least for us here in the Triad, we knew today was going to be a cool day, 50s, maybe 3 degrees cooler than we had originally forecasted. But between tracking and trying to figure out what Joaquin was going to do, and then working with this upper level low, that's ultimately what's bringing us our rain. It was like temperatures really just hit the back burner. But you're right, Brad. I mean, between the temperatures and the wind so far, that's been really what most everyone has been talking about.
It's cold, it's nasty, and it's just not good to be outside. It does feel like winter to a degree, which I don't think is an exaggeration. We haven't felt temperatures like this for a while. But I was surprised how quickly the winds came in this morning. We started to have some down trees, as early as 8, 9 o'clock or so. And there were some power outages very quickly. And not as much since then, actually, which is interesting for us. So we'll keep on following that later.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see because some of the guidance actually shows the winds getting stronger as we go into Sunday, which I think will be interesting to see if that actually unfolds because if the wind cranks up as we go into Sunday after getting a day and a half of rain, then I think that's when you'll probably see the biggest tree fall in the area, start getting trees coming down left and right, and then power outages. So it might be one of those delayed things where after everyone thinks, okay, the rain's letting up, we start to see some trees come down. And it's curious, we talked about the flood watch up for the entire state of North and South Carolina. It's also interesting to see high wind watch, wind advisories. Because all these products, it's really confusing with the public to try to explain all the different facets of what's going on with this thing.
I'm going to be interested to see where those highest winds do set up. I think the pressure gradient is going to be, really tightly packed for everybody, but is it going to be a narrow corridor of high winds really close to the North Carolina, South Carolina border, or are they very spread out? So far today, they have been pretty darn spread out, but as this thing cranks up a little bit more and strengthens a little bit more, how high could the gusts be? Could they be up to 45 miles per hour, like some of the wind advisory products say? Was skeptical before, but now that's looking not crazy.
Yeah, this morning I was like, oh, where's this wind coming from? And then you're like, oh, it's just getting stronger and stronger and stronger as the day's gone on. So it's been kind of interesting to watch. I was going to share my screen again because one of the things that I've been keeping an eye on is this short range, the HER model we look at. And these are the 850 millibar winds. And for those who are watching online, you see the color scheme. And I'm going to go out through tonight, and hopefully it'll load here. You start to see these low-level winds start to pick up, especially as that heavy rain band comes in. And some of these winds are around 35 to 40 knots, which is pretty strong just off the deck, about 5,000, 3 to 5,000 feet off the ground. And especially in the mountains, that could intersect the slope side. So it could be really breezy up there in the mountains this evening.
It's interesting, Brad. You bring up, the heavy rainfall with, some of these gusts. And, even though the heavy rain hasn't really arrived here in the Triad yet, looking at some of these gusts, the heavy rainfall kind of moving over the Sanford area there in Lee County, and then starting to move into Alamance County. Not many wind gusts getting
Yeah.
all that high. I mean, Winston-Salem, I think, just reported a gust of 35 miles per hour. That's the highest they've been
Hmm.
since this morning, whereas Greensboro and a lot of the other parts of the Piedmont here, we've only seen wind gusts, I mean, 20, 25, maybe a couple approaching 30 since this morning. So I'm really surprised that there's not as, or I would have thought there would have been more wind with that rain.
Yeah, I agree. You thought it would have mixed some of those stronger winds down to the surface, but I think Tim hit it exactly. I saw stronger winds this morning when things were drying out a little bit. It was kind of interesting to see the winds gust under the cloudy skies. What are your guys' feelings about, who's going to get this historic part? We've heard that thrown around quite a bit, and not from the media, from the Weather Service offices here in the Southeast, and when you look at the numbers, comparatively, I looked at our 3-day rainfall record for Charlotte. 3-day rainfall event record was 8.66, which was right in the ballpark of some of the model guidance. Where do you guys think the heaviest rain is actually going to end up at the end of the weekend? And we all pull up our list of these epic rainfall totals. Who do you think is going to be at the top?
I think you got to go to the Palmetto State. Would be what I would say at this point. I wouldn't have said that a couple days ago. I would have said, raised our hand right here. But it doesn't look like that anymore. I mean, I think I would be worried if I were in Charleston for a number of reasons. Not only did they have the coastal flooding anytime it rains, it seems, and it's been bad there already, and will probably continue to get worse and worse if they get 10 inches of rain. I wouldn't want to see what it looks like there.
Grant, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm just actually looking at some of the, recent models there. I really do think, I mean, you've got that band stretching basically from like Greenville kind of down, almost splitting, maybe more so leaning toward Columbia down into, Charleston. So along that same line, I think that's where you're going to get a lot of that heavy rainfall. And of course, maybe not just, rainfall in that particular area, but you've got all the rain coming from the mountains. I mean, from Asheville south, it's just like a freeway for water to be rushing those rivers and, looking at those rivers rising. So jackpot in terms of rainfall, yeah, probably cutting it from Columbia down to Charleston.
Well, real quick too, we were talking. We had a hangout a couple nights ago, and Jason Boyer in Asheville was mentioning some folks in his area on some of the slopes had seen about 20 inches of rain with the last rain event. So it's like if you can get that with that, if you get the right wind flow with this, what are you going to get? Are you going to get 30 inches of rain? I mean, that's scary to think about.
Yeah, and that's what I thought too, Tim, going into this whole event. A lot of people asking about this upslope thing, and the models never handle it very well. And last weekend was a good example. While we had drizzle and mist for about 3 or 4 days, and it only ended up accumulating to like an inch and a half, there were parts in the mountains that, at the end of the day, you're like, the radar didn't look very impressive. And all of a sudden you see a total of 10 or 15 inches of rain. And I was like, holy cow. And I think that's an interesting part of this is, I don't know if the radar always does justice to this type of rain setup. Like, it looks like it's not raining that hard. And I noticed this last night when I left the station. I'm staring at the radar during 11 o'clock news, and I'm like, yeah, it's raining. I go outside, and it was pouring. I mean, it was unbelievable. And the radar just didn't do it justice, which tells me a lot of this rain is occurring really low in the cloud layer, and it's not getting intercepted by the beam, or you're getting a lot of small raindrops.
We have a weather spotter up in Rockingham County, which is north of Greensboro, pretty close to the Virginia border, probably about 10 miles or so from there. And he was reporting today that even though they've kind of had a light mist, light drizzle pretty consistently throughout the day, that he's got ponding in his yard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a combination of the saturation from earlier in the week and then just that persistent, really light but dense drizzle and mist, that's going to add up more to what you would think would.
So what's the over-under on the drought being gone by next week?
Well, technically, we're already out of it. We're in a normally dry now in Greensboro.
Yes.
Which is wonderful. It almost seems silly to talk about the drought given the next couple of days. But, yeah, I would. This reminds me a lot really quickly of I worked in Wilmington back in 2010, and we had a week there in September. It was a similar setup. We were 15 inches dry for the whole year going into it. And we got 23 inches of rain in 7 days, which was more rain than they got during Floyd. and broke all these records. And we completely got out of the drought, no less, and we were 10 inches wet for the year after that event. So this is kind of similar for somebody in this event.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, it's funny. Even though we've kind of knocked a good edge off of the drought here, we're still, as of this morning, 7 inches below average for the year. So we actually could still use some more rain, at least in the Charlotte area. But our drought got cut by about 25% just in the last week from the rain over the weekend. I see that Jim Gandy's here now from Columbia. Jim, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, great. We were just talking about what a great weekend you're going to have.
It's going to be busy, and we're already beginning to get some pretty good rainfall reports. In fact, along the coast, you've probably already seen the report of 7 inches of rain in the Myrtle Beach area. I can tell you that in the eastern part of the Midlands, which is Sumter, Manning, on up toward Bishopville, they're already seeing an inch of rain, and it's only just begun.
Yeah, and we were just talking about that when you look at the radar, it looks certainly impressive, but do you think that this rain is heavier than it actually looks on radar? It's kind of deceiving sometimes when you look at the radar here.
It's hard to say. I think based on the rainfall estimates from the radar and the rain gauges, they're actually pretty close right now.
Okay.
At least what we've seen so far, but we haven't seen real heavy rain. It's been light to moderate rain. And I think that overnight, for the most part, it's probably going to be just persistent rain that builds up over time.
Yeah, and Jim, tell people that are watching a little bit about the Columbia area that aren't familiar with how flood-prone that area actually is.
It's kind of hard to explain, but it's hillier terrain than you might expect for this area, and we do have some favorite locations that flood very easily. In fact, not too far from our TV station is a popular area called 5 Points, and there's a creek called Rocky Branch Creek that runs through there. But it's the watershed for a good part of the downtown area. And so the downtown being higher than the surrounding area. So when it rains hard, it just rushes right down into that creek. And we've seen floods on the Rocky Branch Creek alone go from not flood, just your regular stream, up to 4 feet above flood stage in 5 minutes.
Holy cow. Yeah, that's kind of like Charlotte. We've got a couple areas like that too, and for a lot of people that are new at our station, I tell them, I said, Charlotte's full of creeks, and it's got a little bit of terrain like Columbia, and because of the development here, this growing city, the runoff is just unbelievable how quickly it gets in these creeks.
Well, it was kind of interesting, if you've been watching what the computer models have been projecting, they range here in Columbia anywhere from 7 to 17 inches of rain over the weekend. And so we went back and we took a look, and the record rainfall for a day is 5.79 inches. For 2 days, it's 7.69 inches. That was back in 1949. And for 3 days, it's 8.38. So what we're basically looking at is record rainfall.
Yeah, that's pretty close to our record too. Our 3-day record's like 8.66. And a lot of that fell on one day. It was like 5 inches of that was in one of the days of the 3-day period. So,
as it turns out, our record daily rainfall was in 1959 with Hurricane Cindy.
Wow. Go ahead, Grant. You're going to say something?
I think Tim, were you going to say something?
Yeah, Jim. Tim Buckley here at WFMY. What's your concern level? You've been in the Columbia area a long time. Going into this event, what's your concern level about what the flooding might look like given the projections?
It's hard to say because we've never seen anything quite like this. Low-lying areas are going to flood. If we had simply half the rainfall that we're forecasting, all the rivers would go over their flood banks. Mm-hmm. So, and keep in mind that this is oriented from the coast all the way to the mountains. And what falls in the North Carolina mountains, South Carolina mountains, all comes down through the Midlands. So I've been telling our people that once our rivers go out of flood stage or go into flood, we're likely to see that flood for a week. As far as flash floods, if we see flash floods, it's going to be this weekend. It'll be the result of a lot of rain in a short period of time. But flood warnings could persist for well over a week.
Let me ask you guys, I mean, I'll open up to everybody, Brad and Jim and Tim as well. Um, what could go right to make it not be as bad? I mean, and granted, we're at a point now where it is better than what it originally could have been with Joaquin, but at this point with what we're looking at, what could make it be a better situation to where we don't see as much rainfall and the potential flooding? What do you guys think about that? Or is that possible?
Well, you know, with the computer models, there's always the element of uncertainty. So, I mean, maybe they're off. The problem I'm having with that is that based on our analysis, the rainfall that occurred along the coast is already higher than what the Euro was forecasting. So that leads us to believe we're likely to see the higher end than the lower end of the rainfall. And everything seems to be progressing as we thought it would, in the time frame that we thought it would. The unfortunate thing is we don't think that the heaviest rainfall for us is going to come until Saturday night and Sunday. And by that time, we're projected to already have about 5 or 6 inches of rain.
Yeah, and that's kind of funny too, because I was thinking the same thing. Because the thing that has me worried is the band tonight, as Jim talked about. Because when you looked at the guidance, it looked like that band tomorrow night was going to be pretty strong. This does seem to be overperforming, and the orientation of the band seems to be much different than what I anticipated. I anticipated a more northwest to southeast, and this is more due north and south, which means it's tapping into better moisture, to be honest with you.
Well, if you look at the water vapor channel satellite, you can see that the upper level low is already tapping the moisture from Joaquin.
Yeah.
And it's north-south. And what's going to happen as Joaquin pulls away, it's still going to tap the moisture, but the orientation is going to change because the upper level low is going to change.
Yeah.
And so instead of north-south, it's going to be slowly over the weekend kind of doing one of these things. And wherever that pivot is, it's just going to get clobbered because they're not going to get any breaks.
Yeah. Yeah, so Grant, I guess the answer is there isn't one.
Hey, I mean, you know, I guess because I'm looking at here, you know, how long does that kind of branch of rainfall or that band, how long does that sit over our area? And you know, it's like, and that's what's going to be tough for us because we're sitting here thinking, okay, like you were saying, Brad, we've got it sitting there north south. How long before it does that and drops below our area? And quite honestly, that's what's ultimately going to determine for a couple of our rivers. We're sitting there, how do you forecast how much rain is going to go into that river? Is it minor flood stage or potentially major flood stage? And that's a tough thing at this point.
Yeah, I was given this analogy earlier at one of our editorial meetings. I was saying that this rain band is kind of like somebody taking a door, you're opening the door all the way around. You know, where Jim is, he's going to be where the door is all the way open or all the way closed, where it's just going to stay there. For us here in the middle, especially here in the triad, we're going to see this, you know, it depends on how quickly the door opens or how slowly the door opens. That's going to depend on how long that band sits over us. So at first it looked like a couple days ago we were going to see this band sit over top of us for several days. Now it's only probably going to be several hours for us here, which makes our rainfall forecast a little harder because it's, you know, trying to time it out.
Start flooding.
Yeah.
Some places.
Sorry, guys, I was talking to my producer there. So that's the life of the TV business here. We're planning our 11 o'clock show. There's your behind-the-scenes stuff there. Yeah, we're actually trying to find some nighttime video here of flooding. So we're looking for these areas where the flooding has been going on tonight, Myrtle Beach area, down to our southeast, our Sandhill communities. I saw some giant flood warning polygons east of me. I started to wonder, holy cow, are they going to start putting these polygons out for this whole band? But so far we've been kind of lucky. But the rain in our area is over our Sandhills community, which is a soil type that tends to hold the water a little bit better. So we'll see what happens as it gets closer to the Charlotte area. The one thing that I think will be interesting going into tomorrow is if there's a lull and that band maybe reforms, or maybe we get a break and people kind of let their guard down. And I think that's one of the things I ran into today a lot. And why I think Jim made a good point that some of the moisture from Joaquin is getting pulled in. While that's an indirect impact, it's not a direct impact. What do you guys make of this thing that everybody was trying to blame this on Joaquin, and Joaquin's going to slam into the coast, and the communication issue you have when so many headlines are talking about Joaquin is the problem, and then they show a track of Joaquin 500 miles offshore. People let their guard down. That was my biggest frustration fighting here in the last couple of days, because we had a big problem going on here that really wasn't associated with Joaquin. You didn't want people to say, oh, Joaquin's going to miss us. There's nothing going to happen now.
It's hard to fight that battle, isn't it? I saw a hashtag on Twitter I love today from Nate Johnson. Every weather tweet he's been going with hashtag not Joaquin, and that's kind of the message, right? You know, this is not it, but it is indirectly related. But at the same time, you know, you got to keep people aware, and it's tough when you hear the hurricane's not coming. Of course, people in the public are going to expect that that's good news, but certainly for Brad and Jim and Columbia and Charlotte, you have plenty on your plate without Joaquin coming in.
And you know what? I wonder how bad this would be if we weren't in a drought. You know, if we did have full pond in a lot of these, you know, these lakes and creeks and streams, and our soil was moistened up, it blows my mind to think of how bad it actually could have been even without the drought in place.
You know, Brad, talking about, you know, Joaquin, you know, in the beginning of the week, I mean, we were saying, hey, you know, there may be a mid-Atlantic landfall. There maybe not a landfall, but potentially somewhere, you know, brushing the East Coast. And so, you know, trying to, you know, explain these situations, and you have these two different elements, you know, since Tuesday, we've been talking about these two elements. And so we get the public, we get everybody thinking, okay, two storm, maybe kind of a hybrid storm of sorts. And then within 24, 36 hours, now all of a sudden we have to go, no, forget that. You know, now, you know, okay, hurricane's out there, it's a big storm, but we still have our problems. But I mean, to think, you know, what it could have been if what, you know, was a bigger player in this. Gosh, I cannot imagine.
Yeah, you hate to do the what ifs, but you know, a couple days ago we were posturing for the what if. What if we got this, and then a true hurricane coming right in, up all the way through North Carolina, up against the mountains. It really could have been a total disaster. Thankfully, that part is not happening. Still plenty, but.
So you're not buying the Fujiwara that it's going to come swinging back?
The NAM finally gave up.
Yeah, the NAM, I think the Hurricane Wharf is still slamming it into Wilmington. I don't know.
Well, here's that, you know, for those of you, Brad, this would be of interest to you. There's, I have a home up in North Carolina. It's in Polk County.
Yeah.
And there's a place up there called Brights Creek. And there used to be a town right on Brights Creek. And I am told that in 1911, a hurricane came inland and parked itself right over western North Carolina and dumped 30 inches of rain in 24 hours. Now, the terrain is quite hilly.
Yeah.
And, of course, the resulting flash flood wiped out the entire town. And, of course, it never rebuilt. At first, I was skeptical of that. But the terrain is such that sometimes things can go stationary in that area. And I've only owned the place for 9 years. And not too long after I bought the place, we had a thunderstorm one night that got stationed right over it. We had 9 inches of rain in 6 hours. Yeah. So in western North Carolina, these hurricanes can just dump tremendous amounts of rain.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like last weekend, if you get a southeast wind and this upslope flow, you sit there and you're like, it just looks like it's light rain. You don't realize it's just rains continuously and continuously, and they anchor on those eastern-facing slopes, and it just never moves.
Guys, I got a question here on Twitter from a viewer, Grant Weiss. He's in our market. He's up in Surrey County. He's wondering, is there any reason to believe that the heavier rain setting up at the coast right along the shore, could that suck or block some of the tropical moisture from coming farther inland? Hmm.
That's a wintertime issue, isn't it? When whenever convection along the coast blocks our inflow, the
The Florida
problem is
Panhandle.
the problem is in this case, the hose is already up here. The water's there's nothing really to stop it. It's that convection at the coast is like a train car on the train, and it's moving along the track. So eventually, it's going to move up here. There's nothing really to block it. So a little different scenario, but that's a good question because we get that a lot in the winter or with winter storms where the convection will block the moisture inflow to the north. The problem is this inflow is so strong, and it's probably going to increase tonight as the upper low pivots a little bit, and that jet max continues to swing down. And that brings me to something. I don't know what you guys looking at the upper air charts and the orientation of this upper trough and the inflow of moisture. I've never seen anything like this in the southeast. It's just such a unique setup for a heavy rain event.
The setup is so good. You know, the upper low being so anomalously strong, this big pinwheel right there in Georgia, South Carolina, it's just perfect. You know, you look at the water vapor loop and the rainfall loop right now, and it almost reminds me, as a kid that grew up in upstate New York, it reminds me almost of a monster lake effect band.
Exactly.
On a macro scale,
Yeah.
where you have this fire hose that's not going to quit until the setup changes. And it's kind of a similar setup, just on a huge scale.
Yeah, Tim, I actually had to use the word fetch on the air.
Wow.
It reminded me of lake effect, and somebody asked me what it was, and I said, well, if you're not from the Great Lakes, you kind of don't listen to fetch. And I said, it's the distance of water that the wind travels over. I said, we've got a big fetch on this one, you know?
Yeah, growing up in the eastern shore of Lake Ontario, I know a lot about fetch.
Jeff tried to jump in here from VC. I don't know if he's on. I see his picture there at the bottom. Those guys dodged a big bullet up there. They were under the gun when this storm was going to make landfall at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. And for those that don't know that area, the Hampton Roads, the Tidewater region, boy, it's just so susceptible to flood. They're still going to get flooding because one of the things that I think maybe people didn't realize is this onshore flow that's been so strong and the astronomical high tides. We had a crew in the Outer Banks for a little while, and the amount of tidal surge and flooding that's been going on out there has been pretty impressive for a long duration. It almost feels like a nor'easter out the coast right now.
Yeah, I mean, the coastal flooding, the tides, the high tides, even, you know, area beaches in southeastern North Carolina, Outer Banks, everything's been messy. It's just, you know, you think about those what-if scenarios. If you ever got a hurricane to come right up the Hampton Roads area, I'm sure it's happened before. I'm not familiar with the area so well, but that could just be a total disaster.
Isabel was pretty bad. I was out at Atlantic Beach for that one, and the winds were strong, but the surge was amazing because of the way that the storm approached the coast. It pushed the water just in the right direction, and I was amazed how quickly the water came up. It was almost like a tsunami type setup. The water just went from nothing to, you know, over the beachhead and the dune in no time. One other question that I've been getting a lot of today, and I don't know how many of you guys have got this obsession with how much snow this could have been.
Oh my gosh.
And I shared a map. I said, all right, I'm going to do it 8-to-1 because trust me, and people don't understand, meteorologically, these processes are completely different, and I get that. But typically, climatologically, an average ratio for us is about 6 or 8-to-1 down here for liquid to snow. So I made a map, and I'll be danged if it wasn't the most shared thing I probably posted yesterday on my Facebook page.
Could you imagine? I mean, you really can't imagine it. And I guess you could also say it's, like you were saying, Brad, meteorologically not really possible. I mean,
you wouldn't have this much moisture in place.
I would hope not. That would be a nightmare.
That is a snow fan's dream to have that much moisture.
Well, we were
okay. So good question here about El Nino. What do you think this is an El Nino type storm or pattern that will set up for the rest of the cool season?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Well, okay, so in El Nino, what we often see in the El Nino type cool season is the strong subtropical jet, right?
Yep.
So do we have a strong subtropical jet right now?
Not with this one.
It's the reason it's a big storm is because the upper low is not moving. I think with the El Nino setup, you would see things
Yeah, it's
cruising
more
along.
I heard, and I won't name the network, do a package, and they used the word Rex block, which I thought was cool until they explained it completely wrong. And I thought all my meteorology professors were cringing as they heard that butchering of the explanation. But it is kind of interesting that this fascination now people have with like these type of setups with the blocking in the North Atlantic, which I think is an interesting thing in and of itself. And maybe Jim could talk about this. We've had a lot more of this North Atlantic blocking going on in the last couple of cool seasons. That's led to the cold air, and you know, it attributed to Sandy. It's contributing to this event. Do you think that's a kind of an event we're going to see more of, Jim?
Yeah, I think so. We've been seeing it, but you know, how do you anticipate these things? You know, I think that Stu Ostro did a pretty good job of showing that this is becoming more common, but that doesn't help you forecast these things. You know, really, it wasn't until the model started showing what was going on with this situation that we began to look, well, wait a second. You know, first of all, of course, the models were forecasting the storm to come into North Carolina and just to kind of do a loop around the low. Fortunately, that's not happening, but it is akin to a blocking pattern, and we're seeing more of that.
Now, how long do you think this upper low is going to sit around? I think that would be the next question I'm going to see, because if it rains tonight and it rains tomorrow and it's raining on Sunday,
yeah,
people are going to, when is this low going to get ejected out of here? Or is it just going to have to sit and fill?
No, it'll get ejected out.
Yeah.
It's just going to take some time. Monday, Tuesday, probably in the time frame. It's not like western lows that can sit there for a week or so.
Yeah.
This one will eventually get kicked out.
You know, it's incredible. We've had a lot of clouds and gloom and dreariness here that did involve some heavy rain over the last week. We have not seen much sunshine, and every day since last Thursday has had measurable rain for us here in Greensboro, Winston-Salem. That's 9 days in a row, including today. Ironically enough, I was talking to the climate office. Our record is 10 days in a row for precipitation. I would have thought it would be much longer than that, but it stands to reason that, you know, we're probably going to set a record for most days consecutively with rainfall, which is kind of shocking.
Wow, that is pretty amazing. And, you know, typically October is a beautiful time of year in this part of the country. It's our second driest month in Charlotte, at least behind all months of April. And we had the wettest April, I think, in like 20 years. So it's kind of weird. Our 2 dry months this year end up going to be really wet.
For the most part, although we had no rain up until like a week ago, all month long. We were about 1/4 of an inch for all of September, and now, careful what you wish for.
I timed out my overseeding and aeration perfectly. I mean, I just got that stuff down right before the first rain. I just hope I didn't wash it all the way.
Do you guys have any other viewer questions?
I'm checking my questions, see if we got any more here.
I have a hypothetical from somebody wanting to know, what if the hurricane came in?
Well, I think it's pretty easy. If you get all that much rain that we're going to be seeing and put winds on top of that, say goodbye to your trees.
Yeah.
It's going to be bad enough. We're going to see trees coming down. But if you add much wind to this, it's not going to take much to knock a tree down.
Yeah,
I think it was...
Go ahead, Tim.
I think it was Wednesday. We were having a meeting here at the station just about the what-ifs. And at that point, it really, really did look like hurricane could come in North Carolina, could come all the way to the mountains, and we were trying to prepare everybody. You know, this is what we could be in for. I think we could have had, you know, 2 weeks long power outages, multiple trees down. Probably everybody has a tree down in their yard, and just really awful flooding on top of, you know, this. I don't know what you had to say, Brad.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think wind damage would have been pretty extensive, but in some ways, it might have been less rain for some areas, which is amazing to think about. because I don't think you would have had this awkward orientation of this rain band if the storm would have moved in. We still would have had a lot of rain. Trust me, it would have been issues, but in some weird way, it probably would have been less rain for some folks. The one thing I wonder about Joaquin is how much damage it actually ended up doing down in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I can't imagine having a Category 4 hurricane for 2 days, which is pretty much what they've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. So I'm trying to unmute Jeff. He's trying to talk here. It won't let me talk. Why is it not? All right, I'm trying to unmute you. See if I can control you here. Oh, it does not like you for some reason. You're muted for some reason. Are you muted on your? Here, let me see if I can unmute you.
No Virginians allowed. This is a Carolinas only chat.
All right. Oh, I see you. I can't get down there. Does not want
to. While we're waiting, another viewer question here wants to know. Dylan is asking, have you all ever seen this much rain?
I have not.
I mean, Dylan, I talked about how in 2010 I was in Wilmington and we got about 23 inches in a week from a similar setup. We had a big upper low centered in Alabama, Georgia-ish, and it was a really narrow band of heavy rain. It pretty much just clipped the Cape Fear area and parts of the Outer Banks, but that's the only time I can remember, aside from hurricanes.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right.
Hey, we have been trying for an hour to get into this thing. We've had, I'm not exaggerating, 8 people total working on this thing. So anyway, so I've been listening off and on as we've been working. One thing I know you just talked a little bit about is you're talking about the flooding, and we've got a number of different issues than you guys. You were just talking about the winds. That's probably our second biggest at this point, is what we're going to see on Sunday. If we've already had gusts to 40-ish, 42 at the coastline, actually 45 at one point this evening, and we've had a few trees down, not a lot. If we start getting some sustained winds at 38, 40-ish, like the 12Z runs were showing, and gust up to 50, 55, then we would be a lot more worried. I'm glad that the 18Zs backed off a little on those wind speeds, because that could have been a big problem for us.
I'm sorry. I muted myself. It's amazing how strong the winds actually have been, even though you have no really wind field associated with Joaquin. This has all been just a strong onshore flow. Almost feels like a nor'easter to me, in the way this has been going on for a couple days now.
And early in the talk, you guys were talking about the north-south orientation, and I mean, obviously you're looking at the same imagery I am. It's really starting to, I think, fill in and also pivot, as we heard a little bit earlier. So you guys are going to be dealing with a whole different set of problems than us. We've had our 6 inches of rain here in the last 36 hours or whatever. But now our thing would be the winds, and we're going to have some serious flooding. We were earlier at high tide, only a 4-inch difference between Hurricane Sandy, and we're talking, right on the border of major flooding, and we're expecting on Sunday to at least get up that high again. And some of the different slosh models and other models that we use are calling for closer to 7 feet. That would be only about 8 or 10 inches under Isabel. I don't think we're going to quite get there, but again, whole different set of problems than you guys.
So Jeff, real quick question. Tim Buckley at WFMY here. What is it about Sunday that makes you more concerned with the winds and that sort of thing?
Well, just the wind speeds are supposed to go up a little bit. You know, a little bit of a lull during the day tomorrow, and then there's just a little bit more of the forcing on Sunday. So all the last models, I know the new ones will come in soon, but the 18Z had backed off a little bit. But just in general, our winds are supposed to be due east, sustained at 39, gusting to 50 some on Sunday, versus tomorrow's sustained at 25, gusting to 37 or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's funny you said that orientation. I saw Ryan Maui, Dr. Maui, tweet this out from Weatherbell, showing that plume of moisture. This is a precipitable water loop, it looks like, showing the moisture plume streaming back into the Carolinas. And it's kind of interesting how it's attached to Joaquin. It's just a pretty fascinating image.
What else is interesting about it, I'm sitting here in the Triad of North Carolina, and look at the drier air trying to punch in from the east. So one of our concerns is, and it's a good concern, is all the heavy rain goes south. Do we get a peak or two of sunshine tomorrow? I mean, I don't expect it, but it's crazy how that happens.
I'm calling for some possible sunshine breaking through here.
Yeah, I think so.
Wow, wouldn't that be something? And then with the upper low, you wonder if you'll get some convection down underneath the upper low as it moves back up this way.
Well, I can tell you we're seeing some thunderstorms coming into the coastal areas. In fact, right now, we've got some pretty good rain coming into Clarendon County. We anticipate our first flash flood warnings probably will be issued in the next several hours.
Yeah, I could see that happening. It's amazing. The rainfall rates have been pretty impressive so far. And the quickness of which I've seen flash flood warnings issued with some of this rain has been pretty impressive.
Have you all seen some of the pictures out of like Calabash area along the North Carolina coast, right north of Myrtle Beach? Definitely plenty of flooding there with some cars and homes and things like that. Looks pretty like they've gotten some of the worst of it so far, with radar estimates of 12 inches or so in places like Columbus County.
Sorry, guys, I'm actually looking at some video from Myrtle Beach. So one of our production guys was showing me of all the flooding down there. It's just amazing. Wow. And Ocean Boulevard, North Myrtle Beach. I mean, cars are up to their wheel wells in water. It's unbelievable.
We have video of water up to car windows here. And there's a restaurant that's right on the Lynn Haven River, little inlet that comes in off the Chesapeake Bay. And there's a restaurant actually right next door to the restaurants my kids work at. And there's video from there of the water all the way up on the back deck, over the handrail, and partially up the walls of the building. And they're still going to hold an event, a wedding event, up in the higher room that's a little higher up this evening.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Sorry, I'm just checking our, we're starting to get some lightning strikes now around Charlotte as the rain's moving in. It's been pretty impressive now that we're starting to see the heavy rain move in. I'm waiting to see if we're going to get some of our first warnings. I don't want to go too much longer, guys. I know, Jeff, you just got in, and a lot of us got to get to some 11 o'clock show prep here. Some final thoughts before we go, before the top of the hour. How do you think the weekend's going to unfold in your area? And I posed this question earlier. We only had two of us in here. Which area do you think is going to end up with the most rainfall? Jim, I'll probably put this to you first. Which area do you think, at least in the Palmetto State, is going to end up being the bullseye?
Boy, that's hard to say. It changes from model run to model run. I've been telling our people, in general, across the whole state, I think 5 to 10 inches. But somebody's going to come in with 20 inches of rain. I just don't know where that's going to be. But I will tell you this, they just issued a flood advisory now for Charleston and Berkeley County. There's some pretty good stuff coming into the Charleston area now. It's moving north into Clarendon County. So basically, things are starting to unfold.
Yeah. Wow. Well, good luck, Jim. I know it's going to be a long weekend for you.
We're prepared.
Yeah,
We've got some additional staff in here, so I think we'll be okay.
that's good.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to drop off, so good luck to all of you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
All right, Tim. I know Grant jumped out of there. What are you guys going to run into this weekend? What do you think your biggest issues will be?
I mean, tell you what, we're looking a lot better than we were a couple days ago. We're dealing with the heavy rain now. It was reluctant to move in over the last several hours in the first place. So if you're watching from the Triad, we're getting our heavy rain as we speak. Now we kind of see how long it lasts. I'm thinking into the mid-morning hours tomorrow, and then that band really starts to pivot down towards Brad and Charlotte. And the rest of the day tomorrow for us, we're looking at scattered showers, maybe a peak of sunshine or two. Stays windy all weekend, so we'll see those winds continue to be an issue through Monday for us. But more scattered showers on Sunday, and maybe on Monday that pivot, the last pivot north, could start clip us a little bit. But overall, we're going to get most of our rain by the middle of the morning tomorrow, and we'll see what that brings for localized flooding. But this could have been a whole lot worse. So thankfully, I think it's one that we won't remember for decades to come, at least in the Triad.
Yeah. What about you, Jeff?
Well, a lot of my competitors are actually calling for several more inches of rain for us. I just don't see that. I think we're going to get a few, pockets every now and then, but I'm sort of like Greensboro there. I'm calling for just showers tomorrow versus occasional, steadier, heavier rain. Everything, and tomorrow I think is going to be a bit of a lull for us in general. We're going to have some high tides here, but probably 6 inches or so under what we saw today. So that'll cause, you'll see some video out of here tomorrow that'll be, semi-scary looking, but it won't be horrible. I think Sunday is our big question mark, and that'll be if the winds get over 40, we're going to have the kinds of issues we had today. If they get up to 45 or 50, we're going to be about 6 inches deeper in terms of water levels, and we'll have probably a few more power outage problems. But I don't foresee us having any heavy rain issues from here on in.
Yeah, I think I agree with you guys. I think it's going to be Jim and I that are going to have all the headaches here over the weekend. And just looking at the way the band is, I think this is going to be a big gradient across my viewing area where I'm probably going to have right around Charlotte South probably 4 to 6, 7 inches of rain, and then ramping up to down by Jim where it could be close to 10 inches. I still am really concerned about my mountain counties. If that band orients southeast to northwest, there's going to be some upslope component that's just going to absolutely get clobbered up there that I think is going to be a big concern for me because they've been wet already. You got landslide issues. You got a whole bevy of other issues up in the mountains. So those areas we're going to be watching. And I think the one thing I would give to everybody watching tonight is don't let your guard down, even if it looks like you're not seeing rain now. This is still a fluid thing, especially for the middle of North Carolina south and into the mountains where the worst weather may be yet to come and could be several waves of it going through the weekend.
I totally. If you look at the way that band is oriented and starting to change, and you look at the HER, for example, and you just look at the next 12 hours, that thing just pivots, and that axis comes in from right up of across the Palmetto State, and right as you said, Brad, into you. I would think you add that orographic component into whether it's Asheville or Grandfather Mountain or those areas are just going to get hammered.
Yeah. And that's an area that you get a southeast wind for a 24-hour period, and it just doesn't squeeze out every inch. It's like being in the Pacific Northwest in like the Olympic range. You get an onshore flow, and it's unbelievable the rainfall rates you get up there.
With 2-inch PWatts this time.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. That's like 300% of average.
Yep.
All right, guys, I'll wrap this up so we can get back to work. Maybe we'll do this tomorrow. Thanks everybody watching out there. Be safe. It's a long weekend. Don't drive in the standing water. Turn around. Don't drown. All the typical spiel we give people. This is one of those cases where you're going to have a lot to deal with this weekend. So be safe out there.
That started as 35. Is that okay?
Yeah, I should say a combat time, so it would be